My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 32 years old. 6 months ago, at my sister-in-law's wedding, my husband's family stood in front of 200 guests and called me broken, barren, a woman who couldn't give their golden son what a real wife should. My mother-in-law, Diane, had spent 4 years telling anyone who'd listen that I was infertile, that Marcus deserved better, that I was the reason there were no grandchildren at Christmas dinner. I sat through every one of those comments. I smiled through baby showers I wasn't invited to plan. I nodded when Diane accidentally left fertility. Clinic brochures on my kitchen counter. I said nothing when Marcus's father toasted at his other daughter's engagement party and said, "At least someone in this family can carry on our name." What none of them knew was that I had carried on their name twice, and they had taken that from me without ever telling me the truth. Before I go further, if this story is already sitting heavy in your chest, hit like and subscribe, and drop your city and local time below. I always love knowing where you're all listening from tonight. I'm Rachel. This is the story of how the family that humiliated me for 4 years watched my daughters walk through the doors of a wedding they thought I'd never be part of again. Let's go back to where it started. 3 years before that wedding, in a hospital room in Portland, Oregon, where a nurse handed my mother-in-law a clipboard, and I was too drugged, too broken, too trusting to ask a single question. Marcus and I got married in the spring of 2020. Quiet ceremony, backyard, 50 guests, because his family insisted anything bigger should be saved for his sister Vanessa, the real wedding they'd been planning since she was 12. I didn't mind. I loved Marcus, not his family's approval. I told myself that 100 times over the years, especially on the nights Diane called just to ask, so gently, so cruelly, "Any news yet, sweetheart?" There was news. There had always been news. I just didn't know it yet. I found out I was pregnant on a rainy Tuesday morning in October 2021, 4 months after Marcus and I closed on our first house. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at 2 pink lines for almost half an hour before I could bring myself to call him. He was in Seattle for work. When I finally told him, his voice cracked over the phone. And for the first time in a year of trying quietly, without his family knowing, I let myself believe we were going to be okay. At 12 weeks, the ultrasound tech went quiet, then smiled. 2 heartbeats, she said. Twins. Marcus squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. We decided to tell his family that weekend. And for one single afternoon, Diane hugged me like I was really her daughter. I let myself believe things between us had finally shifted. They hadn't. I just didn't know it yet. The pregnancy turned dangerous fast. By 28 weeks, my blood pressure was climbing every visit. Severe preeclampsia, my doctor said, admitting me to Providence St. Vincent in Portland for monitoring. Marcus was mid-launch on a project he couldn't leave, 3 states away. Diane offered to stay with me at the hospital. "Family takes care of family," she told me, sitting by my bed, stroking my hair back like I was a child. I was terrified and exhausted, and I let her in. I don't remember much after that. An emergency C-section at 31 weeks. Magnesium sulfate dripping into my arm to stop the seizures. Machines beeping. I remember 2 cries, distinct, overlapping, and then darkness pulling me under. I woke up 18 hours later in a different room, alone. A nurse explained my babies had been moved to a specialized NICU better equipped for extreme preemies. Diane was already there, she said, managing everything, since Marcus was still in the air. By the time Marcus landed and rushed to the hospital, Diane was waiting for him in the hallway, before he'd even reached my door. I didn't learn until years later what she told him that day. That our daughters hadn't made it. That the loss had broken me completely. And that the kindest thing he could do was never bring it up again. She told my husband his children were dead, and on my hospital paperwork, she quietly noted that the mother had requested no further contact regarding the deceased infants. For 3 years I grieved 2 babies I never got to hold. Marcus grieved with me, gentle, patient, never once pushing me to talk about it. I thought that silence was love. I didn't know it was a wall Diane had built brick by brick, and we were both trapped on opposite sides of it, mourning a lie. I went back to work at the elementary school where I taught second grade. I buried myself in other people's children because I couldn't look at my own loss directly. Every August, around what would have been their birthday, I disappeared into myself for a week. Marcus thought it was normal grief. I thought it was normal grief. Neither of us knew there was nothing to grieve at all. The truth came apart in March of last year, almost by accident. I was updating our family insurance policy and needed the twins. Hospital discharge, paperwork for a life insurance claim, adjustment, something about deceased dependents, needing formal closure documentation. I called Providence St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland to request the file. The woman on the phone paused for a long time. Then she said, "Ma'am, I'm showing an active discharge record. Your daughters were released to a family member on file, a Diane Bennett, with a notarized guardianship. Transfer dated 4 days after delivery. There's no death certificate in this system." I couldn't speak. I made her repeat it 3 times. I hung up and sat on my kitchen floor for an hour before I called Marcus. He came home and I showed him the records. My hands shaking so badly he had to hold the phone for me. His face went the color of ash. "That's not possible," he kept saying. My mother was there. She told me herself. That night, we hired a lawyer who specialized in family fraud and guardianship cases. Within 2 weeks, we learned Diane had used a private, informal adoption arrangement through a family friend, a woman named Carol in Spokane who'd always wanted grandchildren of her own and couldn't have them. Diane had framed it as saving the babies from a mother too sick and too poor to care for premature twins, and a father always away for work. Our daughters were alive, 3 years old, living 2 hours away, and they had no idea we existed. Vanessa's wedding was set for the second Saturday of June, at a vineyard outside Portland, 200 guests. The wedding Diane had been planning since her daughter was 12. We RSVP'd yes. Diane had no idea what we'd spent 3 months building. A custody attorney, a reunification therapist, weekly supervised visits with Carol's blessing once she learned the truth. Herself and was horrified. DNA tests confirming what we already knew in our bones. Carol had never known the full story. When we showed her the discharge fraud, she wept and said, "I would never have taken them if I'd known they had parents who wanted them." We agreed the girls would meet their biological family slowly, gently. By June, they knew our faces. They knew my voice when I read to them on video calls. And Carol, generous beyond anything I deserved, agreed to bring them to the wedding. The ceremony ended. Toasts began. Diane stood, glass raised, talking about family, about legacy, about the granddaughter she now had through Vanessa. I stood up before she could sit back down. "I have someone I'd like everyone to meet," I said. The doors at the back of the reception tent opened. Carol walked in holding 2 small hands. My daughters, in matching yellow dresses, walked toward me like we'd rehearsed it, though we hadn't needed to. 200 faces turned. Diane's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone floor. "Mommy," one of them said, reaching for me. I hadn't heard that word in 3 years of silence Diane manufactured. Marcus stood beside me, voice steady. "These are our daughters. Diane told me they died. She forged discharge papers and gave them away while I was flying home." Gasps rippled through the tent. Vanessa's new mother-in-law covered her mouth. Diane's own sister stood up and said, "Diane, tell me this isn't true." And Diane said nothing at all, because there was nothing left to say. Security didn't need to remove her. She left on her own, alone, while every person who had once called me broken watched 2 living, breathing answers walk past them into my arms. We didn't press criminal charges, the girls. Didn't need a courtroom on top of everything else. We just took them home. Diane wasn't invited. She's never met her granddaughters, and she never will.